I am a 30-year-old office worker and my wife is a 27-year-old homemaker. We don't have any children. The way I found out was quite normal. My wife grew distant. She began dressed more glamorously. She increased her nights out and overnight stays while refusing to be intimate. She refused to let go of her smartphone because her behavior was so unusual. I felt bad, but I ended up checking her phone. It was locked, but because the passcode had not changed since before we married, I recognized it immediately away. And there, I discovered conclusive evidence of her infidelity. Her phone included images of her cuddling with a man I didn't recognize. On closer scrutiny, there were dates highlighted on her phone's calendar. These were the days when she went out or spent the night. And it seemed like she saw him virtually every day. Worse, she met her lover on our anniversary, which was also my birthday, and celebrated with me at home while meeting him behind my back. I was astonished to see my wife celebrating with me at home and congratulating me, but they're playing with other men behind my back. It seems that she had been seeing him for several months, but I could predict why it happened. I've been quite busy at work, which has probably left my wife lonely. That most likely sparked her behavior. Her affections were now firmly fixed on her beloved. The texts I discovered contained insults to me as well as confessions of love for him. There was even talk of divorcing me to marry him. Reading those words devastated me. I was deeply in love with my wife. I loved her, but she didn't reciprocate. I was crushed and could only cry thereafter. I changed. I started getting home as early as possible and became more involved in domestic chores. I made an effort to start conversations and kept in touch on a regular basis. Initially, my wife was called. She frequently ignored me when I chatted with her, but I persisted. I convinced her to join me on weekend trips. I brought her to the movies or went sightseeing, spending as much time with her as possible. On anniversaries, I surprised her with gifts and prepared meals for her. I dedicated every day to her. Throughout this time, she continued to see her lover. Despite this, I tried to save our marriage. Eventually, my efforts paid off, and she began to communicate with me more. We spoke, laughed, and cooked together. We began arranging future adventures and trips with enthusiasm. I felt we were growing closer again. Then one day, while passing the time at work, I purchased a magazine and carried it home. After I came out of the water, I noticed her reading it. She swiftly placed it back on the desk and smiled at me. Perhaps she was reading an article about women's adultery. She then asked me, "What would you do if I cheat on you?" My heart skipped a beat, but I smiled and replied, "You wouldn't do that." She said jokingly, "You never know." I said, "I know because I trust you. I believe you would not do that." Her expression hardened for a time, but I persisted. "I'm not sure if I'm a decent spouse, but I love you very much, and I am obviously your husband. There is no way I would not trust you as your husband. You are the person I most trust. I don't know about you, but I sincerely cherish and love you." My wife burst into tears as soon as she heard this. She told me to. She continued to change after that. She began initiating talks with me despite her guilt. I checked her smartphone a couple times before she began meeting with her lover virtually every day. It had now been reduced to only 2 or 3 times every month. The conversations had generally devolved into disputes, and I could feel her affection returning to me. I was overjoyed. I grew certain that if things went as planned, her heart would fully return to me. I began to sense her love for me grow stronger. I was able to bring my wife back from her lover and rebuild our marriage. Also, there was the story I told to the outside world. All of this was in preparation for my wrath. What do you do if she cheats? This is a no-brainer. Retaliate in every way imaginable. It is true. I am deeply in love with my wife. I really believed her. I love you. Even when I learned of her affair, I assumed it was because I had neglected her. But those photographs are a deal-breaker. They plainly exposed the lover's face. Their talks were terrible. What if you become pregnant? That is okay. Let's just say it's the Dark's child. That is dreadful. Or maybe we'll marry. That is what I desire. I want to divorce the Dark and collect alimony from him. And perhaps we should do it again in the park. But it would be embarrassing if someone saw us. That's what keeps it exciting. My wife had gotten filthy. From now on, I refuse to call her my wife. I'm going to refer to her as the nasty wife. These people were extremely dumb. They left evidence behind. I experienced a rapid succession of despair, fury, disbelief, and laughing. I couldn't be sad or angry anymore. It was evident that forgiving had no value. Divorce was her only option, but that wasn't sufficient for me. Then I decided to seek revenge on these fools. I quickly made copies and kept everything because they appeared to meet virtually regularly. I assumed it would not take long for a detective agency to collect proof. The security was very lax. They took me for a fool. But that's when I started planning, gathering evidence and confronting them. Considering her personality, I anticipated her to insult me and then say goodbye. Of course, I planned to seek alimony, but that would not satisfy me if we were to divorce. I wanted her to cry and beg my forgiveness, only for me to grin as I handed her the divorce papers. What should I do to achieve this? It is quite simple. I had to redirect her feelings towards me. So my war began the following day. The ensuing days were horrible. I did exactly what I said from the beginning. Meanwhile, I engaged a detective agency to collect evidence of her adultery. As expected, they called me within a week, stating that they had obtained sufficient proof. He even joked about how easy his job would be if things constantly went this way. I used their services to obtain additional proof. It was expensive, but I did not mind. Since I was going to bill her later, I had them look into the lover. He was 28 years old and worked for a rather large corporation. He married that guy. I was astonished when I casually noticed the other man's house from a distance. His wife was stunningly lovely. She's neither attractive nor cute. She's average at best when compared to his wife. There is no beat. His wife wins hands down. I don't understand why he'd cheat on my wife when he already has such a lovely wife at home. Nonetheless, I continued to try to keep my wife happy. I also put concealed cameras and a voice recorder at home because she frequently disappeared at night. Data collection got considerably easier. By the way, she mentioned that she was going to a sports club at night while I was working. The suited-up lover would visit our house for their secret encounters. Even when I was at home, they would go out to meet. When I examined the recorder, I found out. She giggled and commented, "It's creepy." When I gave her a gift, she would contact him at night to reject my advances, claiming I had turned him down. Just thinking about my wife's death causes me to laugh uncontrollably. As the struggle progressed, her attitude toward me shifted. She began to grin when I spoke to her, and she appeared to be truly enthusiastic when I suggested excursions. The frequency of her meetings with the other guys fell dramatically, but their conflicts increased. That's when I noticed her heart starting to lean back towards me. So I decided it was time for the final phase. When I got home, I placed a magazine with an article on wives cheating on the table so she would see it before taking a bath. I was positive that my magazine-loving wife would read it even if there wasn't an article like that. I intended to casually bring up the subject in conversation. She asked what I would do if she cheated. Then she started crying. She said, "Me too." I battled not to laugh. It went just how I had anticipated. I was trying desperately not to laugh. In reality, a few days later, a dinner was organized for myself, my wife, and both of our parents. It was intended to be a wonderful family dinner together. Of course, this was my idea. Everything was heading towards that day. On the day of the event, everyone met at my parents' house. The supper was going smoothly. When the moment arrived, I began to pretend to cry. I didn't cry, but suddenly starting to cry caused everyone to panic. "Hello? What is wrong with you?" "Hello, what's wrong?" said Judy, my mother-in-law. "Sorry." I made it through with my phony sobs. I questioned if my performance was too unrealistic without actual tears. So I excused myself to the restroom and administered the eye drops I'd brought just in case. When I came back from the bathroom, I was crying uncontrollably. It sparked even more hysteria. Finally, I started to talk. "Sorry, I got a little carried away," father-in-law James inquired. "That is okay." "What? What's happening?" I was saddened to be sitting here eating a lunch with everyone and thinking it will all end soon. Will it end? What do you mean? "Sorry, Dad, Mom, Judy, and James. I'm getting divorced." "What?" Everyone was stunned. My wife's face was particularly stunning. Then, as time passed, everyone began feverishly questioning me. Especially my wife worked hard. I didn't comprehend half of what she was saying. Then I took an A3 envelope from my purse and pulled out a few images. I realized something was wrong with her long ago, but I still wanted to trust her. So I put my trust in her and resolved to find out the truth. I felt awful about it, but I researched it. And then this. Everyone's attention focused on the images as I handed them out. My dirty wife froze in that moment. Not only her. Except for me, everyone was stunned, not surprising. The detective agency took those images, which depict my wife and her partner. These were the greatest photographs I painstakingly selected from among all of the evidence photos. The clarity of their faces, especially at night, demonstrates how advanced modern cameras are. Their faces were extremely clear. I was giggling on the inside, pretending to cry. I covered my face to conceal my gleaming cheeks. Thinking back, it still makes me excited. Suddenly, she yelled, "No!" At that point, her father erupted in rage. "How dare you!" A slap sent my wife falling, causing a critical hit. She was knocked out in a single blow, but he didn't stop there. He assumed the saddle position and began slapping. "Do you comprehend what you've done here?" Her mother went in front of her husband, shouting and striking her in the head. "What type of person are you?" She couldn't stand up to her parents, a tag team attack. Then my parents snapped out of it and attempted to stop her parents. I'm still faking tears. After a brief period of commotion, everything settled down and the debate began. Gloom filled the room. My wife and her parents were shocked. My parents looked better. Mom cried, "Sorry, Mom," but I continued with the conversation. By then, I realized I didn't have to act anymore. So I switched back to a neutral expression. "So, what is this about?" It isn't as it seems. It is a misconception, misunderstanding, with such distinct images in front of her. "What crap? Misunderstanding? What do you mean? It is not. It's not as you think." The talk was going nowhere, so I proceeded to the next stage. I slowly got up. I made a phone call. "Hello? Yes, it's me. Could you come now?" "Understood. I will be right there." I hung up. Everyone was stunned again. Soon later, a group arrived at my parents' home. That included the boyfriend, his wife, and his parents. The minute they spotted them, my parents and her parents were astonished once more. When the lover and his parents entered, they apologized. "This time my husband has gotten you in trouble. No, it is not your fault. My husband's adultery is my duty." Then the lover's parents began apologizing. "I am his father. I don't know where to begin apologizing for this. Please, you are not the one who should apologize." However, the lover remained silent, most likely out of shame. His face had become absolutely pallid, and I see this. His father became enraged. "Don't you intend to apologize to his father?" Punched him in the face. It was more like he was attempting to knock him down. His face smacked with the floor, producing a nosebleed, and he began to scream and tremble as he apologized. My wife was shivering while watching this. It was a really pleasing sight. I had spoken with his wife several days before to this day. I showed her the proof I acquired, which revealed his adultery. She cried aloud. Apparently, she has not noticed any evidence of this at home. She was simply waiting patiently every night for him to get home, ministering to him. What a pitiful story awaits him. Who is genuinely cheating on my wife? So I told her about my plan, and we made arrangements for his parents to accompany her to my call today. After all, his presence is necessary for such an occasion. Then a large meeting was conducted. Both of them were stumbling through their statements. Their father stood at their side, ready to strike any foolishness with his fist. It took some time, but eventually the entire tale became obvious. They'd started meeting around a year and a half ago. He scooped up my wife as she was walking outside. They initially met in secret, but neither I nor his wife noticed. They went bald and started meeting virtually every day, becoming friends with benefits. Then they both began to deny having romantic feelings, stating that they only truly loved me and his wife. So I played the tapes I'd created. "I love you. I no longer care about my loser hubby. I also love you more than my wife. All I want is you. Let us get married." These were the best things I'd chosen. The minute they heard this, his face changed from pale to green, and she let out a supersonic scream. Immediately after, the fathers continued public punishment. It was time to get into the main topic. The first attack came from his wife. She scowled at him. "I suppose you already know, but we can't continue as husband and wife. Let's get divorced." "Wait. Please wait a minute. Wouldn't you simply nod silently?" Once again, the iron fist of justice was used, ignoring the uproar on their side. I continued with my own speech. Allow us to settle too. Do you mean divorce? Obviously. No, anything but that. Are you stupid? After all of this, you truly believe that? Listen to me. I genuinely love you. I really do. How can I trust that now? It is true. I realize how essential you are to me. I don't care about him anymore. It's just you. What is that intended to mean? When do our marriage vows become meaningless to you? No, I sincerely adore you. Of course, nobody believed her story. I pretended to be one of the doubters, but I was the only one who knew. That was exactly how she felt. Yes, all the pain I endured to serve her was for this moment. Her feelings had nearly returned to me, but I pushed her away, tossing and trampling. I glanced down on her. I looked absolutely down on her. She was sobbing and hanging to my feet, begging pardon. It was terrible. It seemed like a knot within me was being undone. I felt like I could fly if I closed my eyes. That is how thrilling it felt for me. Against this backdrop, the discussions were challenging. His parents left. The rest would be done at home, regarding the settlement. His parents agreed to pay a decent sum immediately. They pleaded that I spare them the trial. We agreed on this. After consulting with my lawyer, we obtained signatures and thumbprints from him and his father on a formal pledge, which concluded our transactions with him. As for my wife, I believe she was on the point of a collapse. She sat in a stupor, tears running down her cheeks without expression, shrieking every time divorce was suggested. I questioned why she was acting like a victim. It was impossible to conduct a sensible conversation, so I talked to her parents instead. The material remained the same. They would provide any amount of compensation. My wife had done enough to deserve it, but they wanted to avoid a trial. Despite everything, she remained their daughter. To be honest, witnessing her wretched state was enough for me at that point. So I was all right as long as the detective agency and attorney's fees were covered. After several days of traveling back and forth to her family's home, dealing with my frantic wife and her parents, we eventually obtained their signatures on the agreement and filed for divorce. A large sum of money was then transferred to me as compensation. I won't give the precise sum, but it was big. However, following that, my wife, or rather my ex-wife, began stalking. No matter how many times her parents brought her back, she refused to quit. I was so fed up that I quit my job and moved. I had a new job lined up thanks to an acquaintance. The compensation was slightly lower, but the job was more rewarding than my prior one. Of course, I did not inform her parents about my new address. I also canceled my phone number and made anonymous calls to my family. This gets us to the present. As a result, my retribution on her had too big of an impact. She became nearly a stalker, causing me to leave, and her parents abandoned her at home, experiencing numerous challenges. I feel awful about it. I could not forgive her, but I held no malice toward her parents. Still, I'm honestly glad I was able to end the relationship. The boyfriend got divorced and was disowned by his parents. In addition, his ex-wife appears to have demanded that he pay a large amount of compensation. She didn't ask for any compensation for my ex-wife, but she demanded everything from him. As a result, he struggles to make ends meet each month. His ex-wife told me this. In fact, we've been meeting rather often lately. Neither of us is ready for marriage, but we have a good connection. This was the vengeance I exacted. I'm starting a new job next week, so I decided to write this down as a kind of memoir. Sorry if this is a dull narrative, but it is only for my own delight. Writing down both the surface plot and the plans I had in motion turned out to be quite a task. It simply demonstrates how much preparation was required and how many people were affected. Seriously, it was a major ordeal. When I first planned it, I had no idea how tough it would be to pretend to be cordial to a wife who had betrayed me. It was almost enough to break me mentally. It was so difficult at times that I thought I'd give up. So, when I eventually did it, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond revenge. Here is the next story. Daddy, Alex is being terrible. Help me out. My wife, Tiffany, attempts to seek assistance from her devoted father using a whiny voice that his adored daughter relies on. Her father, Kyle, is outraged. Because of you, this boy is tormented by his inability to have children. How could you do such a dreadful thing? I am at a loss for words after his surprising comment. After all, Tiffany swore she didn't want children. I wanted to confront her on why she lied, but I was too exhausted. I vowed to talk about it again when I returned from my business trip, but what greeted me at home was a completed divorce form. I don't care anymore. She told me to file it. So I did. It was for the best. I decided to use this occasion to try something I'd always wanted to do. What do you mean? Selling your home? Tiffany and Kyle arrive at my new house. Do you truly have no heart? Simply because we have a combined mortgage? Do you think you can do whatever you want? Tiffany seemed to have yet to tell her father the full truth about the children, the house, and everything else. I chose to tell him everything. My name is Alex Johnson. I work for a company that designs and sells novelties to corporations. After splitting up with a partner, I considered marrying in my 20s. I hadn't felt like getting married and had planned to devote my life to work. Then, at 41, I had a tragic experience. Maya, a college buddy, offered to introduce me to a high school classmate. Her name is Tiffany. She lost her mother early on and was spoilt by her father. She's a little selfish, but at heart she's a diligent worker and a good friend of mine. I believe she would be an excellent match for you. Alex is introduced later. Tiffany was exactly what Maya had described herself as, show through. But when it came to work, she spoke passionately about how rewarding her career was. She enjoys her profession and is highly dedicated, I suppose. I apologize. I've been talking about myself the entire time. Do not worry about it. I loved listening because it was about an industry I am unfamiliar with. Plus, your zeal for your work shone through. I quickly fell for Tiffany, who flushed nervously. We began dating 1 week after meeting. Hey, we have been dating for half a year, right? Let us get married. It was fast to bring up marriage, but we were both over 40 for our age. I didn't think too hard before deciding to marry. Yeah, let us get married. Thus, we married within 6 months after meeting. Tiffany, on the other hand, revealed her true colors shortly after her marriage. That day, I hosted a home party, which we both attended. The celebration was enjoyable, but Tiffany seemed strange when we arrived home. What's up with them? They looked down on me since I did not have children. Tiffany and her friends, especially Maya, spent a lot of time together throughout high school and appeared to be close on the surface. Every month, they get together at someone's house for a celebration. Except for Tiffany, the other couples married young and had children in elementary or middle school. Furthermore, she is the only one working full-time, so she often feels excluded. I believe they mean no harm, so just let it slip. I was taken aback by her makeover, but sought to reassure her. You are siding with other women over your own wives. That is not what I meant. If you are uncomfortable, perhaps we should stop attending home parties. This negates the objective. She appeared to have a strong attachment to the parties. She complained, yet was always present. If we had children, perhaps things would be different. But she's always been opposed to having children. We got married, as I had heard. As I considered what to do after a year of marriage, I became aware of another problem. Kyle, her father, made such visits. Tiffany. I purchased a limited edition cheesecake today to commemorate the start of our marriage. I didn't dispute Kyle's attachment to Tiffany, given that he lost his wife early and raised her alone. However, possibly because I welcomed him, he began to visit more frequently, and now he comes over on a daily basis without prior notice to Tiffany. It's a little easier during the week because he leaves after dinner, but on weekends, he starts early. So my days off do not feel like days off at all, Dad. Thank you, always. Alex does not appear to be thoughtful enough. I will purchase the treats. If there is anything you wish to eat, please let me know. Okay, that's correct. He just doesn't understand women. You are the finest, Daddy. I had meant to remain single for the rest of my life, so I bought a house in my 30s, and Tiffany moved in, signaling the beginning of our marriage. If it had been a condominium, I might have been able to avoid him. However, it is difficult to repel Kyle's invasions in a detached property. Thank you for your consideration. Although it was spoken sarcastically, I received sweets and thanked him. But he snorted. What exactly are you talking about? This is a unique cheesecake that we cannot purchase without lighting up. I will let Tiffany eat it all. Saying so, he handed Tiffany a giant entire cheesecake. If you want some, get in line and buy it yourself. I will let you know how it tastes. Kyle's indulgence with his daughter is excessive. The prospect of this going on indefinitely gives me a headache. Meanwhile, on the day of the usual house party, I couldn't take it anymore. As soon as we arrived home, I made Tiffany sit on the sofa. Enough is enough. I understand. Feeling out of place with high school friends, but speaking ill of children is unacceptable. The problem stemmed from Tiffany's remark about my son. He just doesn't appear to be very good at studying. She had bluntly told a fourth grader, "You'd better stick with football. Otherwise, you will live your life at the bottom of society." Maya and I had to smooth things over, but her husband was furious. "If you hate it so much, you don't have to go to the home parties. Your dad comes over every day and I'm already stressed out. Don't add to my burden. You think my dad visiting is a burden? That's awful. How would you feel if the roles were reversed? If my mom came over every day, you'd hate it. That would be impossible." Tiffany expressed her disgust. "You're doing to me what you consider utterly impossible. Can't you just ask your dad to reduce his visits? I'm not saying he can't come over. I hope that would make her reconsider about Kyle's daily visits. But it was not to be. That's impossible to. I'd miss Dad too much, too selfish." The conversation went nowhere with her refusing to apologize for anything. Eventually, we had a huge fight, and just when things seemed to get out of hand, Kyle showed up. "Daddy, Alex is being awful. Help me out. What did you do to my daughter? I just told her it's not okay to speak ill of a friend's child. Do you have no heart?" He exploded. "It's because of you that she's struggling with not being able to have kids. She's just envious of other people's children and spoke out of turn. How could you do such a dreadful thing? What's he talking about? After all, Tiffany has been refusing to even try for children since we got married. It's impossible for us to have kids." I hadn't worried about it, given our age, but to think he blames me for not having children. I wanted to confront Tiffany, but was too tired. I checked the time and confirmed it was still early enough to catch a plane. I'm going to head to my business trip destination early. Let's cool off and talk when I get back. I regretted thinking that might have been too harsh while on board. When I returned home from the trip, Tiffany was waiting at the entrance. "Welcome back, dear. We both work. So being greeted like this has never happened before." I thought it was a gesture of reflection on her behavior, but I was wrong. "I think we should get a divorce. I've written the divorce papers and left them in the living room. Please file them." "Wait, let's talk first. I have nothing to say to you. Dad's getting special food for poor me tonight, so I'm going back to my parents' house. I'll be back tomorrow night. So pack your things and leave by then. Leave. This is my house. You want to kick me out after hurting me deeply with your words? You should at least give me the house as compensation." It made no sense, but arguing seemed pointless then. "I'll leave by tomorrow. Just say that sooner." She left the house with a spring in her step, passing me on her way out, heading to the living room to check the divorce papers. I found them already filled out on the table, just like when we got married. It struck me how this single piece of paper would end our marriage. It all felt so sudden. "I don't care anymore," she said to Violet, "so I will." I immediately went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers. It was for the best. I decided to take this opportunity to pursue something I've always wanted to do. I sent my belongings to my parents' house for the time being and moved into a new home a few months later. Though I had bought my first home, I wasn't partly satisfied with it. My new home was designed down to the details according to my preferences, and I'm living a comfortable life. Then one day Tiffany came to visit. "What do you mean? Selling your home?" Next to her stood Kyle, not even trying to hide his anger. "I had just decided yesterday, now that my new house was completed, that I wanted to sell the house Tiffany and I had lived in and had consulted a real estate agent. They were supposed to assess it this weekend, so I had messaged her to move out soon. I expected her to come over since she hadn't replied, but her visit was sooner than anticipated." "Do you truly have no heart? Simply because we have a combined mortgage? Do you think you can do whatever you want?" It seems she still hadn't told Kyle that the house was mine. "Kyle, the mortgage payments for that house have already been completed. There's no way you finished paying it off within a year. Did you use Tiffany's savings to pay it all off?" Unprepared for this turn of events, Tiffany went pale after her father's angry accusation. "Wait, Dad, let me explain. Can you please be quiet for a moment? It makes me happy to see you're still considerate of your dad, even now. Do not worry. I did that house back for you. Tiffany is known for her quick thinking and excellent sales performance, often receiving incentives for her work. I remembered Maya saying Tiffany was great at work, but often missed the mark in her personal life. And now it seemed hilariously true. That house was bought outright before we got married, without a mortgage. I worked for a big corporation before, and having been single for a long time, I had quite a bit of savings. I wanted to live somewhere quiet away from the city center so the house wasn't too expensive, allowing me to pay in full. In other words, I could sell the house as soon as Tiffany moved out. If you still can't accept this, should I bring the purchase documents to show you? My confidence seemed to have convinced him that I wasn't lying. He turned to Tiffany in a panic. Tiffany, what's all this? I thought it was a poor man who just changed jobs 3 years ago, and you were paying for most of the living expenses, struggling to come up with an excuse. She just trembled. So Tiffany told you that? Do you think a husband who made his wife pay most of the living expenses could live in a mansion like this? I now live in what could be called a mansion near the center of New York. Having decided to live a bachelor life for good this time concluded, you must have been saving the money by making Tiffany pay for living expenses. Kyle seemed reluctant to believe his daughter had deceived him. I was scouted by my current company. The more contracts I secure, the higher my reward. That's how I was able to afford this place. My company manufactures novelties for store openings and events. Originally, I was involved in product development at my previous job when I suddenly received a call from someone claiming to be an intermediary. There's a company that wants your expertise and scouted me. I was surprised to receive the call. Having worked on what was considered a hit product, but never expected it to reach another company, my current company pays a base salary with additional rewards for contracts secured. Considering I plan to remain unmarried and dedicate my life to work, the job offer was tempting even if the income was sometimes frighteningly high. Fortunately, the novelties I've designed have become well known for boosting customer traffic, leading to constant requests for my work. It's impossible for me to have needed financial help from Tiffany finally understanding. He asked Tiffany if it was true. Seeing her nod, he was stunned. Tiffany, you better start packing to move out of that house. I'll cover the down payment since you must be short on cash. It seemed likely he was unaware of Tiffany's financial situation. Short on cash. Tiffany works at a large company and has good sales. That can't be right. He cautiously looked at Tiffany. Unfortunately, she couldn't deny it because it was true. Kyle. Tiffany spends nearly all her salary on beauty treatments and luxury brands. She probably has little to no savings. I never asked her to contribute to living expenses since it was my house. But given her spending habits, it was hard to imagine she had saved much. I just wanted to be happier than Maya and the others. Why do they seem happier than me? Even though I work so hard. Being single without kids, you can spend all your time and money on yourself, which surely means you're happier. The only reason I married Alex was that he had his own house and said we didn't need to have kids, so I could spend more on beauty treatments. I finally understood why she was so fixated on the home parties. She was trying to show off her branded items to prove she was happier than the rest. At the same time, as much as I had suspected, I realized that I was never truly loved, which made me sad. Maya said you were a hard worker and a dear friend. I wonder what Maya would think if she knew Tiffany's true feelings. Just the thought makes my heart ache. Maya was my savior. My parents were against me going to college, but I wanted to study there. So I chose to live in the dorm and work part-time to pay for tuition and living expenses. I managed for 2 years, but by the 3rd year I was physically and mentally exhausted. Considering dropping out and finding a job, that's when she helped me. Hey, you look really pale. Are you okay? Are you eating properly? I was friends with her boyfriend, so we knew each other by sight. She seemed worried about how pale I looked when she happened to see me on campus. She offered me her lunch. My parents run a diner. It's leftovers from yesterday, but you're welcome to it if you want. As I ate, I started to cry. I've been thinking about dropping out of college. After hearing my story, it seemed she had already talked to her boyfriend about me, and they offered to help me talk to their parents. My mom and dad asked if he'd want to work and live with us. I appreciate the offer, but that seems too much. Do not worry about it. Look, I'm practically living with my boyfriend now. My parents feel lonely. If you don't mind, could you sort of take my place? I accepted Maya and her parents' kindness and started working and living with them. They treated me like their own child financially. It became much easier without dorm fees and with meals covered. I managed to graduate college and land a job at a big company, all thanks to her reaching out that day. Maya thought Tiffany and I would make a great couple. True to her words, I fell for you. It's a real shame it had to end in divorce. Tiffany seemed to be crying, but it was only for a moment, so I couldn't be sure. She ran off, followed hastily by her father. soon after she moved out of my house. I expected more of a fuss, but it was surprisingly straightforward, though I heard it was tough for her afterward. Turns out Kyle had given up his house to live with her at my place. Unable to return home, they had to look for a new place. However, due to Tiffany's spending habits, which started long before our marriage, she often fell behind on rent, and that made it difficult for her to pass rental applications. And Kyle faced similar issues due to his age. They eventually found a place in a run-down house far from the bus station with shared facilities. My husband works in real estate, and they ended up helping Tiffany despite all the bad mouthing. Tiffany came to my house after settling into her new life, expressing regret for her past behavior. I wonder why I was so desperate to outdo Maya. It feels so empty now. You should have realized it sooner. She looked worn and her skin showed her age now that she couldn't afford her previous lifestyle. I know you might not believe me, but I really did have feelings for you. I'm not asking for marriage again. But could you consider me once more? She seemed truly remorseful, but I'm not kind enough to just say, let's start over. If you still feel the same way in a year, I'll think about it. Realizing she wasn't completely rejected, she smiled softly, like when we first met. So what are you planning to do now? When I visited Maya's family diner for the first time in a while, I ran into Maya. I hadn't mentioned Tiffany's visit, so I shared how she seemed genuinely remorseful when I told her that she wanted to reconcile. Maya leaned in eagerly. I told you. Right. You're the only one who can take care of Tiffany. When you introduced me, you just said we'd be a good match. It's the same thing. So what will you do if she confesses again in a year? I do not know. I'll think about it then, though I said that I probably already know the answer. No matter what happens, I can't help but still love Tiffany. Let's get to the next story. I'm Daniel, 28 years old. I was dating Sarah, 26 years old, but then I found out she had been cheating on me with a guy named Mike, 33 years old. Furthermore, Mike was engaged to a woman named Linda. She was 30. Sarah and I have been together since college, living together, fighting now and then, but mostly playing the fool in love. However, one day I randomly remembered how a close friend of mine went through a nasty divorce, which got me suspicious of her actions. More precisely, I got curious about her phone-buying society got the better of me. So while she was asleep, I checked her phone but didn't find any damning evidence at first. Just when I thought I was worried over nothing, I noticed a contact saved under Sarah in her phone, which was odd. Displaying the contact revealed a number I didn't recognize. I dialed it from my phone. Suddenly, a ringtone sounded from somewhere in the room. I seized the moment while she was still asleep to locate the ringing phone. Eventually, I found an unfamiliar phone hidden in the pocket of her coat in the closet. Sneaking into the bathroom, I checked the unknown phone. I was met with a flood of messages, then tracing the emails back. It turned out their affair had been going on for 3 years. What a mess. Apparently, the guy was loaded and sweet to boot. I stepped outside, overwhelmed by my sadness, anger, and cowardice, and I called my best friend, even though it was the middle of the night. But I oddly found myself laughing. The friend Ryan answered with, "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I was sleeping. "Yeah, my bad. What's up with you? I need your help. This time? You've got to be kidding. Afraid it's exactly that. Are you serious? I wouldn't be calling you in the middle of the night if I weren't. All right. I'm on my way. You're at your place, right? Stay there and don't do anything stupid." After hanging up, I forwarded emails from Sarah's secret phone to mine. The content was appalling. "I love you. Me too. I'm so happy I met you." I just kept forwarding those messages. Soon after, Ryan arrived in his car. I started with an apology. "Sorry for dragging you out here in the middle of the night. I didn't mean to call you out. I'm just returning the favor for what you did for me." He said I showed him the forwarded messages on my phone as soon as I got into his car. "No thanks. I don't need to see all of them. It's gross." "So, why do you want to do?" "Given the suddenness of it all, I don't really know what I want. Honestly, I just thought of your divorce mess and ended up uncovering all this. I felt bad for calling you so late, but you were the only one I could talk to about this." He laughed. "You thought of my situation. That's harsh. So what do you want to do?" I honestly replied, "I want to punch someone right now. Calm down. That's not going to solve anything, right? You know what? I can't stop the tears or laughter, but I'm calm. If you do something crazy, I'll knock some sense into you," he warned. Thanks, I might need that. So what should we do about those two? After thinking it over for a bit, he suggested the guy's rich. Right. Why not shake him down for some cash? But I replied, no, I won't. Unlike you, I'm not in a position to demand compensation. Okay, then let's see. I'm not considering hiring a private investigator. Just so you know. After pondering for a while, he said, let's forget violence. How about we corner them? But you figure out how to do that. I just nodded. Got it. Once wipeout of tearful laughter had subsided, I went back inside, put Sirius' phone back in, crashed on the sofa the next day, just before noon. Sarah literally woke me up with a slap, feeling absolutely terrible. Why are you sleeping here? You're going to be late. I had plenty of time and my alarm hadn't even gone off yet. I left for work, irritated beyond belief. It was then that the last bit of affection I had started to fade away. I had thought about giving it another go, but her inexplicable outburst in the morning made me decide on separation and revenge. From then on, I pretended everything was normal while sneaking peeks at the emails on the closet phone at night. My boyfriend is being cold. I'm here if you need someone to talk to. As if the guy causing the problem could offer a solution. Right. I want to hear all about it. Maybe at your place, the idiot called. Mike wants to come over to our place. Well, maybe if I make myself scarce, he'll show up. Let's set something up. Anyway, I am checking the closet and saving emails like a thief every night. But she's totally clueless. They both have no idea they're being found out. I've been pretending to sleep on the sofa at night, saying I'm just tired, while Sarah obediently goes to bed alone, sulking, though she never imagined they'd be setting a trap. First up, the classic fake business trip for 3 days. Our company doesn't even do business trips. Plus, I withdrew all our joint savings and canceled the house lease at the same time I signed a lease for a new place just for myself. Almost everything went according to plan within 2 weeks, sleeping on the sofa every night. I barely got any rest, but it was worth it. The last email I saved was, "We'll see each other soon and love you lots." That perked me right up. On the day of my supposed business trip, things went off script. I never expected Sarah to invite Mike over on the very first day. I hadn't taken the day off yet, so I reluctantly went to work. That's where Ryan came in clutch. As soon as Sarah left for work, Ryan came to my house. He moved everything I owned to a storage unit. Originally, I was supposed to move everything to my new place on a day off. I rushed to my work that day and asked my boss for early leave. It put a slight strain on my work reputation, but since it didn't affect my job performance, he let me go. Then I met up with Ryan. He finished moving everything quickly and the house was practically empty. Not a trace of me left, as if I had vanished. It was hilariously perfect. When Ryan saw me, he said with a bit of excitement, "This plan is pretty hardcore. You really thought it through. I might be an idiot for not realizing sooner, but I've been fooled for 3 years. This is nothing compared to that. If she didn't like me, she could have just broken up and then gone out with him. It's just that simple step she skipped. All right, ready to move on to the next part?" At that moment, I had another plan in mind to involve Linda, Mike's fiancée. Somehow, Ryan had taken 2 weeks off work to track down Mike using a photo from Sarah's phone. Not only did he find him, but he also managed to locate his house, a move straight out of a private investigator's playbook. That wouldn't have been possible if Sarah and Mike didn't work at the same place. Furthermore, Ryan made sure Mike wasn't home before he approached Linda's house. Then Linda came out after explaining everything in detail to her. She broke down in tears, unable to believe it. Ryan also shared his own divorce story with her and asked for her co-op creation. She agreed to help us in the car on the way to pick up her, he mentioned softly. Linda seemed like a good person. Lucky it's before the wedding, sounding quite sad. We arrived at Mike's house and Ryan called Linda out. I got out of the car and greeted her neatly. She looked like an average person, not exceptionally beautiful. When I said I'm terribly sorry for my girlfriend's outrageous behavior, and I'm really sorry to involve you in this plan, she replied, "You apologizing won't change anything. I feel the same." And she continued, "I also apologized for the mistake of the man who was to be my husband." Ryan then interjected Linda, "Even though you're not married yet, what you might see today could be the worst scenario possible, something you'd never want to witness. Are you sure you're okay with this? If it's too much, you don't have to come. We'll still report back to you and provide the evidence. Indeed. From my perspective, she looked worn out and listless, the primary victim being thrust into this mess. However, she firmly said I'm okay. Today we have a family meeting planned with both our parents. No matter what happens or in what condition we'll drag Mike back, Sarah will also be brought along. Please understand that her demeanor changed from sorrowful and apologetic to determined. A warrior was born in the car. We explained the plan in detail to Linda. I'm breaking up with her anyway, so whatever happens next is fine by me. Don't you have any lingering feelings? Honestly, I did at first, but seeing her go on with her life without any guilt, I've completely lost those feelings. I understand. I wondered if it would be bad for you if you still had feelings. But it seems I needn't have worried. I initially thought she was frail, but she turned out to be quite intimidating while Linda and I waited in the car. Ryan kept watch. Linda shared that she had been cheated on by a previous boyfriend before dating Mike. She had warned him, if your cheating ever comes to light, I won't just cry and let it end there. He had assured her if I cheated, I'd have to die along with the other woman. Believe me, I love only you. Goodbye to Mike's future. Then a call from Ryan. They're here, no doubt about it. Ready? The moment had arrived. I jumped out of the car and headed to where he was. Sarah and Mike walked up arm in arm, looking pleased with themselves. I was the only one who slumped at the sight. Linda mused, I wonder what kind of face Sarah will make when she sees the almost empty house. She was grinning as if it was someone else's problem. Terrifying, but hearing that reignited my fighting spirit. Thank you, warrior. Even from behind, it was clear. Sarah unlocked the door, and the moment she opened it, she froze. My spirit soared. Sarah entered the house, followed by Mike. I tiptoed to the door. Then I got a call from Sarah, just as expected. Time for action. I swung the door open and answered the phone with hello, only for her to scream, my God, and Mike to freak out with no way. At that moment, Ryan and Linda weren't yet at the door. Why are you here? What about your business trip? I laughed and said, of course it was a lie. That is dreadful, you tricked me. Tricked? Compared to 3 years, this is nothing. What do you mean 3 years? That's when I called Sarah's other phone. The ringtone ominously echoed. No, you saw it. Snooping around is the worst. The absolute worst is the person who looked the worst. You can't forgive him. Of course, I can't believe this. Then it's over between us, right here, right now. I've already moved out. Everything I bought. This house is leased. Is canceled too. She was stunned. One last thing. Say the same thing to this person. I opened the door and there was Linda. Nice to meet you. I am Mike's fiancée, Linda. Sarah froze completely at the sudden turn of events when Mike stammered. Hey, why are you here? Linda coolly replied. Why? Because you were followed and this is the result. Just then, Ryan piped up saying, Hello, I'm from the detective agency. We've recorded all the emails and conversations. Whoa! An unexpected bluff. What's that about? I wasn't even informed. Mike just collapsed right there with a sly smile, yet politely. Linda said, Thank you for your work. Even if it was just for a few hours, Ryan was like, No problem at all with that, we'll be off. Linda added, all with a smile. Well, this place is already canceled. No point standing around. Let's go home. Our parents will be arriving soon. Mike was trembling and expressing his apology. Sarah just collapsed. I said it might be tough, but hang in there. I'll be leaving now. If anything comes up, contact me right away and decided to leave. Linda thanked me and closed the door. Sarah was saying, Daniel, it's not what it looks. Wait, but I didn't hear the rest. Perhaps she remembered. I said I wouldn't listen to any excuses. As Ryan and I waited in the car, a taxi arrived at the house shortly after. All three came out of the house. From a distance, there seemed to be no physical altercation among them, which was a relief. I went to change my phone number and email immediately. I stayed at Ryan's place that night, and as planned, I used my day off the next day for the moving process. I made sure to properly thank him, and now I live peacefully as if nothing happened. As for the aftermath, for the three of them. Firstly, Mike's engagement was broken off. He was sued for compensation in the presence of a lawyer. It turns out he wasn't as wealthy as he claims to be. He had to pay the expense in installments. Sarah was also sued for compensation by Linda. It was quite the scene with their parents involved. I don't know what happened to her after she paid the money in full. Linda went back to her parents' house before leaving. She specifically came to report on those two fools and said she would be living quietly at home for a while. As for Ryan, who worked so hard for me, he fortunately found a new girlfriend. Everything turned out well in the end. When I first discovered Sarah's infidelity, I was so shocked I couldn't even speak yet. With the help of my good friend, I managed to get my revenge and felt a great sense of relief to this day. I still don't understand why Sarah chose to cheat when breaking up would have been so simple if we weren't even married. If she was just after the thrill, it certainly ended in a foolish way. I hope Ryan and Linda find happiness in the future for their help in this matter. Here is the next story. My marriage with Melanie came to an end after just 3 years. I've fallen in love with someone else. Let's break up until then. I have been completely oblivious to her affair. Indeed, our conversations had dwindled recently. She often came home late, claiming overtime, and on weekends she found reasons to be away from home. I thought maybe that was just how marriage settles down after 3 years. I never imagined her heart had drifted so far from me. I put up with this countryside for 3 years. You should be grateful. You are all about your job. Just job, you know, and never interested in me, she said with a displeased look, whether I tried to discuss, deny, or apologize. Her decision to divorce didn't change. Eventually, I signed the divorce papers, as she demanded within a few days. Melanie packed her belongings and left with her new lover to her parents' home out of state. After she left, I stayed alone in the same house. My life became a cycle of work and home. The days just passed. The town where I was assigned after we got married is a quaint countryside area, not heavily populated. The relationships with the locals were close-knit. Melanie never seemed to enjoy the rural life, and she didn't make close friends after we moved here. Yet our divorce spread quickly, and I became known as the man who was dumped by his wife. People both from the neighborhood and my workplace looked at me with pity. Some directly asked, "That must have been tough. Are you okay?" or inquisitively, "Is it true your wife ran off with another man?" Honestly, the divorce hit me hard. I felt a gaping hole in my chest and longed to talk to someone. But in this small town, everything spreads fast. I didn't want that. So I kept to myself to avoid sinking into despair. I threw myself into work even more than before. It seems my workaholic nature partly caused the loneliness Melanie felt. I had mistakenly thought that being diligent at work would make her happy. Now all I had was my job. I was engrossed in my work, tuning out even the concerns of those around me. Then about 6 months later, a new colleague joined our company. Her name was Susan Jackson, transferred from our New York headquarters. According to my boss, she is 36. 3 years my senior. She is with top sales performance at the headquarters and touted as a future department head. She was assigned to our branch for a year to boost its performance, with her understated yet tasteful makeup. She, dressed in elegant suits, exuded the aura of a sophisticated city woman. From day one, she officially reviewed our work, identifying current issues and future objectives. She was all business with clear, concise instructions. She worked silently and diligently, efficiently, completing her tasks one after another without any idle chatter. She was the epitome of a capable woman, which was incredibly cool. Yet when asking for our help, she'd say, "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" with a humble, gentle smile. Despite her competence, she wasn't unapproachable, and everyone at the branch was charmed by the contrast. Everyone admired and wanted to talk to her. She always finished her work on time, leaving with a cheerful, "Good job, everyone," and swiftly headed home. The female coworkers wondered why she always leaves so quickly. Maybe she has a boyfriend waiting at home. Is she married? There was a buzz of curiosity about her, but nobody seemed to get close to her. Seeing her, I envied her ability to live life so smoothly since Susan came from the city. No one here knows her past. I'd like to live without people knowing my past, not worrying about others' opinions. I've started to think that in this town, everything becomes known quickly. I had resigned myself to that fact because it's a small town. But seeing Susan's behavior, I've started to wonder if moving to a city like hers would clear up my worries. Also, I thought about joining the headquarters to improve my skills inspired by someone as high caliber as her. So I seriously started discussing a transfer to our New York headquarters with my boss. Then one day, a welcome party for Susan was planned. We all left work on time and headed to a nearby bar that day. Susan didn't rush home at her usual time, but joined us for dinner. As the party started, everyone eagerly bombarded her with questions. What kind of work did she do at the headquarters? When did she become the top salesperson? What's her secret? She answered each question meticulously. After a while, the questions shifted to her personal life. Was she married? Did she have a boyfriend? Just as she was about to answer these more personal questions, her phone rang. "Excuse me for a moment." She stepped outside to take the call. The questioning paused, and the room fell silent. Then a drunk coworker, Edward, started pestering me. "Is it true your wife cheated on you?" Suddenly all eyes were on me. "It's over and done with." I tried to deflect, but the inebriated coworker relentlessly prodded. "Did you get any compensation? Did you hire a lawyer?" No one else intervened, seemingly curious themselves. I didn't want to remember any of it. Frustration built up in me, and I was about to snap. Then, "Sorry for stepping out. I'm back now," Susan announced with a smile, sitting down between Edward and me. Then she resumed with a smile. "We were in the middle of questions, weren't we?" And began talking about her personal life. She revealed she was divorced. She had a daughter at 20. Now, in high school, she got pregnant while in college. Took a break to have her daughter and divorced at 30 due to her ex-husband's infidelity. She shared all that. "My daughter lives with my parents in New York." That call was from her. Ended with sweetly smile. She then lightened the mood with more cheerful topics, and neither my story nor hers came up again. I was relieved and deeply grateful to her. Her strength in openly discussing her situation also struck a chord with me. The next day I caught up with her as she was leaving work on time. "Susan, I really appreciate what you did last night. Thank you," I called out to her. She stopped and turned with her usual graceful smile. "I should be thanking you for the wonderful welcome party," she responded with her usual graceful and gentle smile, but sensing my feelings weren't fully conveyed. I anxiously continued speaking. "No, I mean, you heard the questions I was getting from Edward, right? Stepping in and diverting the attention from me. Really helped. I find it really tough to talk in detail about my divorce," I said, scratching my head awkwardly, and she nodded, understanding. "Only I get it. It's hard to put into words when the divorce is still fresh. The pain is normal," as she answered, gently, gazing distantly. "I asked hesitantly because of me. Everyone ended up learning about your past. Are you okay with that?" I was concerned she might have reluctantly taken my place, not wanting to share her own story. I was really worried that she had put herself out there as a substitute for me. Sensing my inner turmoil, she showed an even gentler smile as if understanding my concerns. "Time has healed my wounds. You'll be okay too. Time resolves these things," she reassured me. She waved. "See you tomorrow," lightly, and walked away, leaving me feeling almost dreamy as I watched her go. From then on, we began to chat during breaks at work and sometimes after work. Susan talked to her daughter every day at 6 p.m., explaining why she never stayed late. Sharing her secret made me feel a ticklish sense of camaraderie. She spent her weekends in New York with her daughter. My daughter Catherine loves baking. She's always made something for me to try when I visit. It's something I really look forward to," Susan would say with a tender, almost melting smile, and watching her became a daily highlight for me. Eager to talk more with her, I started working more efficiently to leave work on time just like her until 6 p.m. when she would call her daughter. We chat outside the office to ensure our time together. I worked harder and harder, but that wasn't like right after my divorce when I was trying to forget something. Making an effort to create time to talk with Susan, even when tired, felt somehow gratifying and pleasant. It was a bitterly cold Friday in February. By then, our post-work chats had become a daily routine, with the onset of colder weather. We had taken to talking in a cafe after work instead of outside. It was almost 6 p.m. Once the time passed, we would have 2 days off. Starting tomorrow, we wouldn't see each other for 2 days, as she usually went to New York every weekend. "I want to talk more. I want to spend more time with her," unable to contain my feelings. I blurted out, "I wish I could go with you tomorrow. Sorry." She looked surprised, realizing what I said. I covered my mouth, but it was too late. Seeing my flustered and red face, she chuckled softly. "Sure you can come. I'd like you to meet my daughter, too." Shocked, yet elated at her consent. I mentally did a victory dance the next day. Susan and I boarded the plane together, heading to her hometown in New York. Although I'd been there a few times, its bustling crowd always overwhelmed me, and I was incredibly nervous. Her daughter and parents were at her house. I wondered if it was okay for a guy like me to just show up. I just hoped not to leave a bad impression. Nervously, I entered her house. Her daughter, looking a lot like her, and her kind-looking parents warmly welcomed me. I was ushered into the living room and exchanged greetings with everyone. "We've heard how kind you've been to Susan since her transfer." "Thank you," her parents said with their appreciation. Flustered, I talked about the town where we worked and her accomplishments at the company. Time flew by, and it was almost time for my flight back. Although Susan was supposed to stay overnight, she kindly took me to the airport with her daughter. As we neared the departure gate, her daughter, Catherine, silently handed me a paper bag. "Thank you. Is this for me?" She looked up shyly and whispered, "I heard it's almost your birthday, so I made you some chocolates. I'm good at making sweets. Thank you for making my mom happy." Hearing that, Susan turned red to the ears and panicked. "Who is usually composed? You made this just for me." "Yes, I wanted to give chocolates to my mom's favorite person," Catherine replied, playfully dodging Susan's attempt to cover her mouth and sticking out her tongue. Their interaction was heartwarming, and I felt incredibly happy. "Thank you. Receiving chocolates from the daughter of someone I like makes me the luckiest man." I replied sincerely, a bit shyly, and Catherine covered her face with her hands, squealing, "Wow!" Susan and I exchanged smiles, both blushing at her cute reaction. The following Monday of that weekend, I followed Susan after work as usual. "Thanks for Saturday." The chocolates were delicious. Turning to my voice, Susan appeared to be bashful, and she pulled a neatly wrapped small package from her bag. "Do you know what day it is today?" I nodded enthusiastically, taking the package carefully. Of course, I knew it was my actual birthday, and I'd been restless all day. "Thank you. I'm so happy. Can I join you at your parents' place again?" She looked at me. "Seriously. Be prepared. It's going to be tough. My parents and Catherine seem to like you. They said to bring you again. I bet they'll want you every week." Her smile betraying her embarrassment. And I felt enveloped in happiness again just today. My boss hinted that my request to transfer to New York might soon be granted. My recent hard work had been recognized. Susan's assignment here would end in a few months. If my transfer goes through, it would surely bring us closer, even if it doesn't. I plan to visit her family every weekend by plane, and if needed, I'm willing to change jobs. When my ex-wife Melanie told me that I wasn't interested in her, I didn't quite understand. But meeting Susan, I believe for the first time, I truly learned to love someone. While I don't regret divorcing her, I've reflected a lot. I'm determined to build a happy home with Susan, the precious person I finally found. No matter how hard it is, the thought of this effort fills me with an invigorating sense of purpose. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed the story, please consider liking and subscribing if you have not already. If you have a story to tell me about your own or someone else's situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.